I want you to think about something before we begin. Think of someone you trust completely. A parent. A partner. Someone whose voice, when everything is falling apart, makes you feel like things are going to be okay. Now imagine that person is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not mistaken about something small. Imagine that everything they ever told you, about safety, about belonging, about God, about your future, was a lie. Built carefully, over years, to control you. And imagine that by the time you understand this, it is too late. This is the story of Jonestown. And before you decide you already know it, you don't. Not really. Not the people. Not the voices. Not what it actually felt like from the inside. 918 people died here. They deserve more than a headline. So we're going to take our time. Chapter 1, The Preacher. James Warren Jones was born in 1931 in Crete, Indiana. Small town. Poor family. A father broken by war. A mother who worked every hour she had to keep them alive. From childhood, people who knew Jim Jones remembered two things about him: his intensity and his obsession with death. He organized funerals for animals as a boy. He preached to neighborhood kids in makeshift churches he built himself from scrap wood and determination. He was drawn to religion, not out of faith, exactly, but out of something harder to name. Power. The way a room changes when someone speaks with absolute certainty. By his 20s, Jones was a preacher in Indianapolis. And he did something genuinely radical for the 1950s. He integrated his congregation. In a deeply segregated American city, Jim Jones had black and white members sitting together in the same pews. He marched for civil rights. He adopted children of multiple races, what he called his rainbow family. He ran food programs, medical clinics, housing assistance for people nobody else was helping. To people who had been failed by everyone else, Jim Jones showed up. That matters. Because it explains everything that came after. The people who followed Jim Jones were not foolish. They were not broken. They were people who had been let down by their country, their churches, their communities, and then found a man who seemed to truly see them. Who gave them dignity. Who told them they mattered. That is how it always begins. It always begins that way. Chapter 2, The Temple. By the 1960s, Jones had built the People's Temple into something remarkable. Multiracial. Politically connected. Genuinely community-focused. They fed people. They housed people. They helped addicts and the elderly and anyone the system had forgotten. And they grew. Fast. Jones moved his congregation to California, San Francisco, then Los Angeles. By the mid-1970s, the People's Temple had thousands of members and real political influence. Mayors courted his endorsement. Senators were photographed with him. He was, by every external measure, a man doing good in the world. But inside the temple, the mask was beginning to slip. Jones had become dependent on prescription drugs. Amphetamines and sedatives cycling through him constantly, distorting his thinking, feeding a paranoia that had always been there but was now growing into something consuming. Services that had once been about justice and community became about Jones. His power. His vision. His enemies. Because Jones had developed an obsession with enemies. The government was watching him. Journalists wanted to destroy him. Traitors existed inside the congregation itself, people who doubted, people who asked the wrong questions, people who might leave. Leaving, in the People's Temple, had consequences. Former members who spoke out were harassed. Intimidated. Their families still inside were used as leverage against them. Jones had built what researchers now recognize as a textbook high-control group. Love and belonging at the entry point. Fear and isolation as the mechanism of control. By the mid-1970s, journalists were investigating. Former members were talking. A new West magazine expose was coming. Jim Jones decided it was time to disappear. Chapter 3, The Jungle. Jonestown, Guyana. A stretch of jungle in South America, carved out of the rainforest by temple members who had gone ahead to build it. Jones called it the Promised Land. A socialist paradise, he said, free from American racism and capitalism. Over 1,000 people eventually made the journey. Most had given everything to be there, their savings, their property, their connections to any family member who had not joined. What they found was not a paradise. Jonestown was isolated. The heat was relentless. The work was brutal. Food was inadequate. Medical care was limited. And communication with the outside world was tightly controlled. And Jones was everywhere. Loudspeakers had been positioned throughout the compound so that his voice was inescapable. Day and night. Sermons that ran for hours. Accusations broadcast publicly. Group confession sessions that went on until people broke. In the white nights, Jones would announce, without warning, that enemies were coming. That the community would have to die together rather than be captured, tortured, taken from each other. Everyone would assemble. Everyone would be told to prepare to die. It was a drill. He was rehearsing them. Guards lined the perimeter of the compound. Armed. The jungle was described as dangerous, full of mercenaries sent to destroy them. People who tried to leave were brought back. Children were punished publicly so that their parents would not step out of line. And through all of it, Jones on the loudspeakers. Tired. Drug-slurred. Paranoid. Alternately telling his people he loved them and threatening the ones who showed doubt. People were exhausted. Malnourished. Completely cut off from anyone outside. This is what total control looks like. But someone, on the other side of the world, was paying attention. Chapter 4, The Congressman. Leo Ryan was a United States Congressman from California. He was known for going places other politicians wouldn't go. He had once gone undercover inside a California prison to investigate conditions firsthand. He was not a man who accepted no for an answer. Constituents had been coming to his office for months. Former temple members. Relatives of people in Jonestown. People who hadn't received a real letter from their family in months. People whose loved ones seemed to be writing in a voice that wasn't theirs. Ryan decided to go to Jonestown and see for himself. Jones tried to stop him. Delayed. Negotiated. Threatened. Eventually, with a congressman and a media delegation preparing to arrive regardless, Jones agreed to receive them. On November 14, 1978, Leo Ryan flew to Guyana with journalists, photographers, and the concerned relatives of temple members. The first day of the visit almost seemed normal. Jones hosted a dinner. Temple members performed. People smiled for the cameras. But notes were being passed to Ryan's team. Hidden inside handshakes. Slipped into pockets in quiet corridors. Notes that said, "Help us get out." Chapter 5, November 18, 1978. The morning of November 18. A group of people, 15 at first, then more, had decided to leave Jonestown with Congressman Ryan. They had made their choice. They were going home. Jim Jones watched them go. People who were there described his face in that moment as a kind of death. A collapse behind the eyes. Something that had been holding the performance together simply giving way. The group was taken by truck to a small nearby airstrip called Port Kaituma. 2 planes were waiting. People were loading their bags. Children were being lifted aboard. Then a tractor pulled slowly onto the airstrip. There were armed men on it. They opened fire. Congressman Leo Ryan was killed on that airstrip. He was the first, and remains the only, sitting United States Congressman to be killed in the line of duty in American history. 3 journalists were killed. A temple defector was killed. Others were wounded and bleeding on the tarmac. Some planes managed to get out. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones gathered his people. In the central pavilion, everyone assembled under the open roof. His voice, one final time, over the loudspeakers. He told them what had happened at the airstrip. He told them the enemies would come now. The military. The government. They would take the children. Destroy everything they had built. There was only one path left. He called it revolutionary suicide. Large vats had been prepared. Flavored punch mixed with cyanide, Valium, and chloral hydrate. Syringes were ready for the young children and the elderly who could not drink on their own. The recordings of what happened next are real. They exist. They are held in the United States National Archives. You can listen to them. You can hear Jim Jones speaking. You can hear a woman named Christine Miller stand up, in the middle of all of it, and argue with him. Telling him there is another way. Telling him the children do not deserve to die. You can hear the crowd turn against her. Shouting her down. You can hear the children crying. The children were given the poison first. Because Jim Jones understood one thing with absolute certainty, that parents would not leave their children behind. And he was right. 918 people died in Jonestown on November 18, 1978. 304 of them were children. Jim Jones was found with a gunshot wound to his head. Whether he pulled the trigger himself, or whether someone did it for him, no one has ever been certain. Chapter 6, What Remains? In the days after Jonestown, the world struggled to understand what had happened. The phrase drinking the Kool-Aid entered the language, a casual shorthand that, for the survivors and for the families who lost someone in that jungle, felt like one final cruelty heaped onto everything else. Because the people of Jonestown were not foolish. They were not weak. They were human beings who had been carefully, methodically manipulated by a man who understood exactly how to use hope and belonging in fear, who had isolated them from everyone who might have helped them see, exhausted them until resistance became impossible, and removed every option except the one he offered. Survivors spent years, some spent their entire lives, trying to process what they had lived through. The guilt of surviving. The grief of losing an entire world in a single afternoon. The particular cruelty of being misunderstood by everyone around them. Hundreds of the unidentified dead are buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland, California. Many of them are children. Their names are on a memorial there. Leo Ryan was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal posthumously. He was 53 years old when he died on that airstrip. Christine Miller, the woman who stood up in those final minutes and argued, who tried to save everyone, who was shouted down by the crowd, died with the rest. Nobody knows exactly where in that pavilion she was found. She argued anyway. People always ask the same question about Jonestown. How did this happen? How did over 1,000 intelligent people end up in a jungle, following one man to their deaths? And the honest answer is, it happened the way it always happens. It started with someone who was lonely. Someone who was struggling. Someone who needed, more than anything, to feel like they mattered. And a man who knew exactly what to say to them. 918 people. Most of them didn't want to die. Remember their names. If this story impacted you, leave a like or subscribe for more deep dives into real events that shaped history. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.